So that's our intro music for today. Again, I don't have any music to play because it costs money. But hey, my name is Daniel. I'm the family pastor here at Mag Church, and it is good to have you. Again, we are continuing our Bible study of Luke and Acts. We are almost done with the book of Luke. We are going to break up our Bible studies into shorter thing, because I know I've been going like 15-20 minutes and stuff, and so we want to make them a little easier to digest over the internet. That being said, let's dive right in. So we were in Luke chapter 19 where we left off. Jesus was heading to Jerusalem. He was getting ready to while he was on the way to Jerusalem, he was teaching, he was preaching to the poor, to the hurting, to the outcast. So he wasn't just talking the talk, he was walking the walk, which makes sense because he's God. And so, of course, he's going to love people. Of course, he's going to heal and just do amazing things. So we pick up in the second half of Luke chapter 19, and we're going to go to Luke chapter 21 today. So 19 through 21. So we pick up where Jesus enters Jerusalem, and you might have heard the story. It's Palm Sunday. If you've ever been to a Palm Sunday service or heard about Palm Sunday, this is what we talk about: the triumphant entry. So Jesus rides in on a donkey, and there's a lot going on here, though. Okay, so it's another gospel. So we're talking about Luke, right? We're going through the book of Luke, but another gospel tells us in Matthew, the Gospel of Matthew tells us that him riding in on a donkey is Old Testament prophecy about the Messiah. So he's fulfilling prophecy, riding in on a donkey. And what's happening is there's multitudes, there's crowds and crowds lined up on this road into Jerusalem, and they are worshiping. They are praising God. They're saying things like, "Blessings on the King who comes in the name of the Lord, peace in heaven and glory in the highest heaven." So they're worshiping. They are, because what's happening for them is in the Old Testament. A lot of the prophets, the important people in the Old Testament would claim that there would be this. That God's kingdom would come, and it would come through a king. It would come through, and a lot of them were expecting like military type victories and stuff like that. So that's where they were thinking when it came to God's kingdom. But a lot of things, and with a lot of things in the Bible around the New Testament and Jesus, they didn't really understand what was going on at the time. But they recognize Jesus as this guy who's coming in and trying to set up God's kingdom. So they're worshiping him for that. They might have a little backwards about how he's coming, right? But they're worshiping, and so, but not everybody's happy about it. There's this group, Israelites leaders, religious leaders, Pharisees, whatever you want to call them. They weren't happy, and they kind of rebuked Jesus. They said, "Listen, you got to tell these people to be quiet." And then I love this, and it says in chapter 19, verse 40, he says, Jesus said, "If they kept quiet, the stones along the road would burst into cheers." Man, that's awesome. So here's a little personal note. I never want to be the reason why the rocks or the trees worship, right? They worship, but I don't want to hear them, because that means that nobody's worshiping. So if I'm the last person on earth that's not worshiping, that means the rocks are going to cry out. The rocks are going to burst out into. Hold on. I want to be able to worship God, and even if I'm the last one, I don't want the rocks and the trees to cry out because I'm not worshiping. So anyway, that's a personal note for me. All right, so Luke is also tells us that when Jesus comes closer to Jerusalem, that he's sad. He had this what the Bible calls a triumphant entry, but as he gets closer to Jerusalem, which is like the capital of Israel, he's sad. It says he weeps over Israel because he knows that their rejection is coming, right? He knows what's going to happen in about a week. And with the religious leaders, he knows that they are, because of their rejection of him, it's going to set up this thing that we're going to talk about in chapter 21 in just a couple of seconds. But he says, if only you had recognized the way toward peace, none of this would happen. Basically, he's saying that if you would have accepted what I'm doing, and what I'm trying to do, then nothing that we're going to talk about in chapter 21, none of that would have happened. But they reject him. So what continues after that is, so he rides in on the donkey, and then he goes to the temple, and he sees all these people selling animals for sacrifice, and he clears them out. This is where, like, one of the only times that you see Jesus angry. And a lot of times when people say, well, the Bible says don't get angry. The Bible says don't get angry and sin. Like, don't sin because of your anger. There's something called righteous anger, and Jesus kind of shows it here. He drives them out saying this, and he's quoting Jeremiah, who's Old Testament prophet. He quotes Jeremiah saying, my temple will be a house of prayer, but you have turned it into a den of thieves, or a den of rebels, or a den of robbers. Different translations say the different things. Different versions say this. So, and it's just so he after that he teaches daily in the temple. And so in chapter 20, we're going to go really quick in chapter 20, just kind of overview it. So from there to the beginning of chapter 21, he has a lot of debates with the religious leaders about his authority. He teaches a little bit, kind of calls them out for their hypocrisy and evil doing and things like that. He talks about taxes. He talks about generosity. And then in chapter 21, this is where we're going to kind of talk about for a little bit. Chapter 21, he foretells the future. He's telling them, he's predicting the temple's destruction. So this temple that he's been preaching in for the last few days, he's telling them it will be destroyed, which is rough for them to hear, because to the Israelites, the temple is the place where God's presence is. And so he's saying, listen, this is going to be destroyed. And so that doesn't sit well with them. So in chapter 21, the rest of chapter 21, from verse 5 to 36, Jesus talks about the destruction, what's going to happen, foretells the future, and says, listen, the destruction is going to happen in this generation. And it does. You look back at history and see the Romans came through and kind of destroyed Jerusalem, and it was rough, because they rejected Jesus. It was. I mean, imagine if they had have accepted him, and it's just. Yeah. But he also talks about the persecution of his followers. He's saying people are going to hate you, because you're my followers. Let's see, in verse 12 of chapter 21. But before all this occurs, there will be a time of great persecution. You will be dragged into synagogues and prisons. You will stand trial before kings and governors because you are my followers. But this will be your opportunity to tell them about me. So don't worry in advance about how to answer the charges against you, for I will give you the right words and such wisdom that none of your opponents will be able to reply or refute you. So I think that's great. We're gonna leave off this part of the Bible study with that right there. Okay, some bad things can happen in life. Some persecution can happen in life, and here in America, we're not persecuted the same as Christians in other countries like China, the Middle East, and things like that. But we do face some type of maybe like emotional or mental persecution every now and then. And so I think that it's good to know that Jesus is there with us in that. And so even if it's not persecution, if it's just like questions that people ask, we can have the answers. We pray, we read the Bible, we talk to God, we communicate with him on a regular basis so that when we're asked, we can answer. And I love it that it says nobody will be able to refute you, nobody able to be able to reply, because your answer's from God. And so I love that. We're going to continue in chapter 22. We're in the last week of Jesus's earthly mission ministry, in chapter 19 through the end of Luke. And so it's getting good. I mean, it's been good the whole time, but the conspiracy against Jesus is ramping up, and it's almost getting to the climax of the story where something big is about to happen, and you might already know what's going to happen, but we're going to continue talking about it. Join us tomorrow or the next time that we do this Luke Bible study, Luke and Acts Bible study, and it will continue in chapter 22. Sorry. All right. Bye.